Everyone. So now we're going to dive into unit contribution margin. Okay. All right. So unit contribution margin is kind of a play off of contribution margin and all of the other ones that we learned before this. But now we're looking at it on a per unit basis. So unit meaning on like a per unit basis. So unit contribution margin is useful for analyzing profit potential. The unit contribution margin is most useful when the increase or decrease in sales volume is measured in sales unit or quantity. So we're trying to see, okay, if I was to increase or decrease my sales units, how would that affect my, my potential profit? Okay, so that's what we're looking at. So to come up with our unit contribution margin, it's going to be the sales price. So we're looking here, sales price per unit less our variable cost per unit, and that's how we come up with it. So in looking at example number one, or part one, if Lambert Inc. unit selling price is $20 per unit and its variable cost per unit is $12, what is its unit contribution margin? Well, simple enough. Again, the way we come up with our unit contribution margin is our sales price per unit less our variable cost per unit, and that will be our contribution margin or our unit contribution margin. Okay, so for us, it's going to be $20 less the $12, right? And the difference will bring us to $8, and our unit contribution margin would be $8 per unit. Okay, so now example number two. Okay, in example number two, it says assume that Lambert sales could increase by 15,000 units. Okay, from 50,000 units to 65,000 units. So the increase again is about 15,000 units. It's asking us what would be the increase in Lambert's income. Well, we've already figured that our unit contribution margin equals $8 per unit. So the way we would figure out how this would affect our Lambert's income is that we would do the $15,000 units, increase in units, times our $8 in contribution margin. Okay. So once we did that calculation, if we did 15,000 units times our $8 per unit. So the potential effect of increasing our sales volumes, that would equal, come on, sorry, wrong way. That would equal $120,000 in income. Okay. All right. Moving on. So now let's take this same idea and apply contribution margin now. Okay. So I'm going to switch applications to something a little bit better, and we're going to go through this example. All right, so here we are looking at this particular example. If you're following along, this is example number 5 on the handout, okay? All right, so we have Land & Company sells 160,000 units at $45 per unit. Our variable cost is $27 per unit, and our fixed cost is $975,000. All right, so it's asking us to come up with the contribution margin ratio, the unit contribution margin, in our income from operation. Now, before setting this up or before solving, I would set up what I already know. So what I know for sure is my formula, right? So my sales less my variable cost will equal my contribution margin. And then I'm gonna subtract out fixed cost, and that will equal my income from operations. Okay. What I also know that is when I'm figuring out my contribution margin, the way I figure out my contribution margin, I'm going to put that over to the side here. Contribution margin, a formula for contribution margin equals contribution margin equals sales. Oops. It's going to be, this is the ratio, right? So it's going to be contribution margin divided by sales. Okay. All right. So given the information that they have given us, we can start this all a couple of different ways. So let's start with the information they gave us. So our sales per unit is $45 per unit, right? Per unit, less our variable cost of $27 per unit, right? And so the difference, if we did $45 less 27, we come up with 18, right? That is our contribution, our unit contribution margin. Now, if I wanted to know my dollar value in contribution margin, all I would have to do is multiply this same number times the number of units that I sold, which is 160,000 units. But for right now, this $18 satisfies this blank, okay? All right, so let's continue to go through this example, all right? So actually, let's do exactly what I mentioned. So to figure out what is our contribution margin in dollars, we're gonna do $18 times the 160,000 units that we've sold. 18 times the 160. That comes out to $2,880,000, right? All right. So right now from here, this is our contribution margin, right? And so to come up with the sales amount, right, if we are trying to figure out what is our contribution margin ratio, we also need to know what our sales amount is. Well, to figure out our sales amount, we can apply it here, right? So to figure out our sales is going to be the number of units we sold, which is 160,000, times the cost per unit, or how much we sold it for, which is $45, right? So in doing that calculation, 160,000 times my $45, and we come up with $7,200,000, okay? Now from here, we're gonna plug it into our formula, right? If we're doing our contribution margin ratio, right? So we figured out our contribution margin, we got it from here, right? It's gonna be 2,880,000 divided by our sales, which we figured out here, which is 7,200,000. If we did that calculation, what we come up with is, we come up with 40% as our contribution margin ratio. So this, yeah, 40%, right? This one is $18 per unit. All right, so last but not least, we need to figure out what is our income from operation. Now, I know this is sort of messy, but we can go ahead and fill this in, right? So if we're following along with our formula, right, if I can redo it for a second, we have sales less variable equals contribution margin less our fixed cost equals our net income from operation. Our sales, we figured out, is 7,200,000. Our variable cost, we don't know that, but we could figure it out. But why figure it out when we already know what our contribution margin is, which is the $2,880,000, right? So just pause for a second. If you did want to figure out what our contribution margin, what our variable cost would be, the way we would do that is if we did 7,200,000 less $2.8 million, that's how we would figure out what our variable cost is. So just to humor you guys, I'll do that for you. And that comes out to our variable cost is $4,320,000, right? That goes there, okay? But I mean, again, our focus not necessarily there, but if you needed it, that's how we would go about doing it. And now we're just gonna continue with the problem. Our fixed cost, as they put it here, is $975,000, right? And so our answer, our net income from operation is a $2,880,000. And we have to subtract that out of our fixed cost of $975,000. So our net income from operation, or our income from operation, comes out to $1,905,000. Okay. All right, so if you have any questions, let me know. Again, there's many homework questions very similar to this. So please be sure to make sure you do some practice, okay?